Well, good morning, church. This is Gratitude Sunday, and I have the privilege to sit today with two amazing people and share a story of gratitude. You'll hear how these guys met and just became friends. And of course, a lot of you that come to prayer meeting, you know the story of Patrick, her son, and how we've been praying and praying and praying. And we've seen time after time, miracle after miracle, how God has just stepped into their situation. And they're here today just to say thank you to the Lord, and I hope you'll be encouraged by their story. So we're just going to jump right in. Robert, why don't you just kind of share with us maybe how you guys met and the journey that you've been on?
Well, it was the end of COVID, and I got asked to play on a worship team on a new church that was being built. They wanted to do some online stuff. It only lasted for 2 weeks, and then the building opened up. And I think almost the first week, Martine and her husband John came in and joined the worship team, and we just clicked instantly. We became very, very good friends. And in that time, I would say that for every hour we spent in church, we spent an hour and a half in the parking lot just talking about God and just praising God. And it just turned into this beautiful, beautiful relationship that I'm so grateful for to this very day. Kind of where Patrick comes into the story, we'd known one another for 2 or 3 months, and one night Martine's having a hard time, and in that moment something came over me that I just had to go and pray for her. So I think at that point it's best that Martine just tell what that night was about and what happened in that evening.
Yeah, so that night we were in New Hope and we were doing a Christmas musical thing, and I had gallstone pain and I was sitting in a seat and the pain was so intense that I had to go out to the car. So I go out to the car to lay down to recline my seat, and Robert, filled with compassion, just followed me out to the car and said, "I really want to pray for you. I see you're in a lot of pain. I want to pray for you." So he prayed for me, and the first time it didn't work. The second time, nothing happened. But the third time, lo and behold, the pain went away. At that point, I was so overwhelmed with unbelief. I had got out of the car. I was trying to convince Robert that the pain was gone, running around the parking lot, testing and seeing, and sure enough, it was completely gone.
Praise God. So at this point, you were pregnant with Patrick, right? How far along were you?
Yeah, so it was about somewhere in between the 6 to 9 month range.
And so you guys knew then that there were issues with the baby, or no?
So the gallstones were like on top of everything else, and they couldn't tell in the womb that there was any complications with Patrick. We only found out when he was born.
And so he was born, and quite a rare case, right?
Absolutely. He's 1 in 9 in the whole world. He has a genetic mutation called HNRNPH1 gene mutation, and 1 in 9 in the whole world. But what's really unique about this genetic mutation is that it impacts so many areas of his life. So Pat's unable to walk. He's unable to talk. He has horrific seizures. And at the beginning of his life, he couldn't eat. So he had an NG tube, and now he has a G tube in his stomach. But by the grace of God, we actually taught him how to eat, and now he's fully eating by mouth.
Wow.
It's amazing.
So
yeah.
Just to back up a little bit, because I know for the people that are watching us now, like this is all, maybe a lot of it's new for them, but I remember as a prayer team, Robert, the first time you came to us with this family's issues, like would that have been like right around when he was born, or were we down the road so far before?
It would have been a while after, I think, and basically they had realized there was real problems. And Martine and I, we keep in contact, but we're not messengers or texters. You know,
Right.
it's and she just wrote out to me and said, "Robert, that I've got issues here. Will you pray for me?" And I'm going to be honest, I probably picked the coward's path at that point. I said, "Yes, I'll pray for you, but can I take it to our prayer meeting tonight?" And she said, "Yeah, go for it." And so I brought it before the prayer team, and it was one of those nights in our prayer meetings where everybody was praying, some in a prayer language, some just audible voice, and it just became that symphony of worship that just engulfs us so often. And it was just a beautiful thing. And then the next week, one of the things that can happen in prayer, we make it a one of, but the next week he wasn't healed, and so I brought it up again, and I remember you saying, "Okay, yeah, this is a good thing, we're going to get on board with this." And as we went on board, I kept bringing it up over the next 2 or 3 weeks, just driven by a passion that we had to contend for this. And then Susan gets involved, and some of the other women of the church get involved. And to this very day, they'll often, I'm still praying for Patrick. I'm still praying for Patrick. But I remember those nights, and it was something that came over me that just saw an urgency. And I just said, I can't do this alone. I need the church to come in with me.
So you've served the Lord all your life, pretty much. Have you been a believer and healing and stuff? Wasn't anything new for you, right? You believed in that kind of stuff?
Would have been right around 2015 that I really started to believe. I grew up Catholic, but I didn't have a relationship.
Personal relationship.
So about 2015, I started getting a really intense relationship with the Lord, and that was before Patrick came. So I had a heart for healing. Even before Patrick came, I went to the hospital. I've prayed for people, and it was deeply rooted, this passion for healing. And then when Patrick came, it was like, okay. It really put everything that I believed to the test.
For sure. When it comes that close, it becomes very personal, right?
Yeah.
So you're married. You have another child as well, right?
Yeah.
So what about your husband? What was his thoughts on all of this? When healing sometimes people can be kind of standoffish about it, and
Right.
when it gets this real, can you share a little bit about that?
So my husband's name is John, and he's amazing. And at the beginning, we definitely had our challenges. When we were at the IWK, there is a pediatrician there that said the most amazing thing. She said, I want to tell you a statistic, and it's not to scare you, it's just to show reality here. She said, couples that have a child with severe special needs, such as what Patrick has, she says there's a statistic that says that they are more likely to divorce. It's actually not because of the child. She said oftentimes it's because the circumstance puts fire in the relationship, and it brings out problems that would have came out regardless. And it's such a beautiful thing, because what we really believe is manifest. What we really believe comes out when we're put under fire. So John and I had to walk through it together, and we had to trust God, and we had to be grateful for the people that God had provided for us. Rob, I know you talked about the prayer meeting, but you did so much more than just pray at the prayer meeting and pray on your own. You came to the hospital when we were in the hospital at Christmas. You came to our home and prayed for Patrick. You were involved even outside of just praying. And for those of you struggling, man, hold on to that. If you have people that God is providing in your life, hold on to it, because it's God. It's a way that God comes and encourages us in the midst of our trial.
Yeah, I'm sure you've had many trials over that. Patrick is now how old?
He's about to be 4 in January.
4 years old. Wow. And so there were times, I can remember Robert coming to me, whether it was before prayer meeting or even at prayer meeting, and saying, Kristin, like, it's touch and go right now, right? And that happened many times over the last 4 years, right? Can you, what is that like as a mom and a dad to be, just faced with that dilemma of my child may not make it? What do you do in those moments? Where do you find your strength? Where do you?
You ask yourself how Abraham did it. And that's one story that I actually go back to quite a bit. And I'm not saying that I've done this perfectly. Because Pastor Susan and I talked about it this morning. There was a time where it did defeat me. It crushed me. It devastated me. And I gave in to fear. And I've come to the conclusion that doesn't produce life. And I serve a God who is the name above every name, even above death. And it's like the fire thing that I mentioned. If I don't love my own life unto death, if I'm seeking first the kingdom of God, I can't bow down to the circumstance. I have to bow down to Him. So it was really really intense as a mom, but I had to walk through it. God had to help me. Let your light so shine before men. That applies even more when we're under fire. Absolutely. Yeah. So when I'm faced with Patrick might die, Patrick's having a seizure right now, I refuse to let my light go dim.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's encouraging. But you must, so then in your own personal life, I mean, obviously you spend a lot of time with the Lord to have that kind of a fight in you to say that I'm not going to be defeated. Because I love that you're real and saying sometimes I was defeated, I was down, I was flat. Because I think if we're all honest, there's times when no matter how good our relationship with God, there's times when we feel like, the enemy's got me right now, right? Yeah. But you overcome that. Can you share a couple of moments where you felt, here's kind of the end looks like it's right there, but then whether it's rallying of prayer people like here at Glad Tidings or in your own circle of friends or whatever, the next day it's like, okay, wow, here's light again. Because we've had this, right? I mean, Robert can testify to that, man. We felt like, okay, seems like this is it. But then, no, wait a minute. Now he's starting to, whatever. Now he's eating. And we see him now, and there's still some things that need to happen in his life. But just last night in prayer meeting, you were there with him. This would be a couple of weeks ago, but Patrick was in there and he was vocalizing and whatever. And I'm just going to be real and honest with you. My first thought was like, goodness, that's that could be a little bit distracting. And we're trying to pray, and man, God came to me so quick and said, Kristin, are you serious? Just listen. Like, stop and just listen. There's life in this little boy. Life that many times we thought it was going to be snuffed out, but here he is. And I felt God saying those sounds that he's making, even though they're not, intelligible words necessarily, that's more beautiful to my ears than anything else is being prayed in this room tonight. That was my experience last night at prayer meeting. That's amazing. And so I just encourage you, in a sense, show him off, because he is a miracle, right? Anyway, I don't want to steal your moments, but just share a couple of maybe situations where it felt like it was just, the enemy had you, but then then God steps in.
So we were in the hospital for 2 years on and off fighting. Patrick had chronic vomiting. He couldn't keep anything down. He would get bloated. Everything was frozen. Like, nothing was working. We went to the IWK back and forth. Nothing was working. They had put him on TPN, which is an IV that goes basically as close to his heart as possible, and it gives him nutrition through IV. So this was last resort. It was last resort for him. And what was really terrifying is that he was losing weight on TPN, and that's not supposed to happen. He's supposed to be gaining weight, gaining muscle, and he was losing weight. He was not doing well. And then he had gone unconscious one night. His tummy had bloated up so bad, and he had gone completely unconscious. I had all the nurses come in, and we're like, okay, this might be it. Because he was losing weight, he wasn't doing well. And then they did an EEG on him and found out that he was having pretty significant seizures at that point. And I thought, okay, this is the cherry on top of the mountain that is impossible to move. And I remember I have one of my dearest friends, she came in to have a hospital picnic with me. So she brought in all the foods and all the things, and we're just chatting, and I'm telling her, they just told me this morning that he's having seizures, and it's too much. And she said, because she related the two things together, because he was having abdominal symptoms, and she said, have you ever heard of abdominal seizures? No. And she had shared a few things that she had heard about them, and for the first time it gave me hope. And God was totally speaking through her in that moment, because I needed that hope in that moment of desperation. I needed something to hang on to. And when I brought it up to the doctors, I said, could these two things be related? Could the seizures be the cause of the thing? And they said, I don't get your hopes up. But sure enough, we got him on some seizure medications. And from that point on, he started significantly getting better. And it's not to say that we're not over the hurdle, because even this past week, he's still been having seizures. He's still unable to walk. But God has brought us this far.
And that's what I love, that you're still in the midst of a battle.
Yeah.
You have your days, right? But you're so thankful to have God in your life, right? And to have people like Robert in your life, and to have people like you just mentioned, your friend, who, God is doing this in you, and you're allowing it to to just grow and become a testimony to everyone that's around you, right? That God is still God. Doesn't matter what you're going through, God is still God. That's beautiful.
Just while we're on this topic, it's as we've discussed, we were asked to do this, and we're thinking about it. The seizures start heavily that she was just talking about. 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm awake, and I'm just thinking about this, and I'm praying for Patrick, and I'm just thinking of our history and everything behind us, and suddenly I'm getting this download, and I'm laying in my bed, bawling my eyes out, and the download was this. There's two kinds of hope. One is a verb. It's something you sit around and do. You hope, you wish. The other is a noun. It's something you're given. And the hope, every time the doctors were stealing the hope from her, he may die, he'll never eat, he'll never walk, he'll never respond. And then I see he's eating now. I see him watching cartoons on TV and giggling. I see him last night, a big smile on his face because he was set up. And Martine would contact me for hope, and she held the noun of hope. It was something was giving. And faith is the evidence of hope. It's a bread of hope. And we can have a faith which is kind of wishy-washy, but the biblical definition of faith is it is something that you lay your belief on that's not going to move. And so we have that noun of hope and a rock-solid faith. Sometimes we throw one out there and we say, but not my will, but thine be done. And that absolves us. If nothing happens, it's God's fault. It wasn't his will. I know in my heart that Patrick's condition is not God's will. It's definitely not my will. It's definitely not the will of the parents. And so I have a hope in the God who heals us, and by the stripes on Jesus' back, that we're not over this story yet. We've got a way to go, and we have a faith on something solid. And I think that's what's hold John and Martine together in this day, a solid hope and a solid faith. And I just believe somebody needs to hear what hope and faith really is, biblically speaking, because that's what this. I'm so grateful to know these people, to in some small way to have been included in this story, and I'm thankful.
Awesome. Can I just ask you something? This is maybe real personal, but for those people that have children with special needs, I mean, I know what sometimes is pushed at the hospitals, right? When you find out that you have a child that is not perfect, we all know what's being pushed right now. And it's ultimately let's terminate because life's going to be too tough.
Yeah.
What do you say to that when now you're, obviously that wasn't something you would ever do. Here you are now, 4 years into having this blessing in your life. But it's tough. I mean, you're being honest. It is tough. But what would you say to those either parents who are in it and it's a struggle and they need encouragement, or to somebody that might even be, the baby has not come yet, but they're questioning, should we or should we not? Can you just speak to that just for a moment?
Obviously, life is always the answer. It's a tough, and I think it goes back to the circumstance piece. It's like, will it be hard? Yeah, but we all go through hard. I think we can get in some trouble if we look at the problem and magnify it too much, because we tend to lose sight of what's really important. So with Patrick, there's a lot that I could focus on that are problems. The fact that he can't walk, he can't speak, he has seizures. There's a lot of problems there, and if I focus too hard on those, it can drain me. But if I focus on what God has done through the evil that has been bestowed on Patrick, it's encouraging, and I feel honored that God would trust me in this challenge, like trust me enough to give it to me.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's good. That is awesome. And he is going to be and has been already. He has done a lot for the kingdom, as we know. and story after. We don't have time to go into it all now, but how people have been affected by the way that you've walked this out, and the way that you're living your lives, and so encouraging, so beautiful.
But I think it needs to be said too that in the hospital, John and Martine both resolved to be a testimony. Patrick's condition is not God's will, but he takes a terrible thing and turns it into good. And like you just said, I don't think we even know how many people have been touched.
That's right. Yeah.
We can't reduce our biblical knowledge to principles. When we're put to the test, we should shine. We had nurses come in and be like, you guys are so... The nurses and the doctors, they get treated so poorly by some people, and it's like, it's not their fault that we're in the hospital. It's, why would I treat them any less because my circumstance is not going well?
So what would you say then to the person that's sitting in the seat here this morning that just needs that encouragement, from a mom who's still in it, but just is so thankful to God? What would you say to encourage them?
So, kind of piggybacking off what Robert said, we have a God who doesn't just sit in heaven and watch. We have a God who humbled himself and came on the earth as a man. And we have a God who allowed men to beat him. He doesn't look at us and say, well, I don't understand. He very much understands. For me to be going through this with my son, you could almost say that God went through it with his. And so don't think that God doesn't understand, and don't think that he's not with you. He's as close as the mention of his name. And if you ground yourself, and if you catch me at church and you want to speak to me directly, please come. If you're listening to this and you need this, ground yourself in faith. Ground yourself in faith, and don't let yourself be shaken by the circumstance. Be unmovable and grounded, and watch what God does. I love the potter and the clay scenario, because the clay does nothing but yield. That's all the clay has to do, is yield. So just yield to God, give it all to him, surrender it all to him, and watch what he does.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. So full of gratitude, and I'm sure this is going to touch people. Bless you.
Bless you.